r/ask Reddit. What is your life's biggest mystery that will probably go unsolved? I worked at the public library. I scanned a guy's library card, then went to hand it back to him. He saw me start to hand it to him. Our hands were about a foot apart. Then suddenly the card was gone. It never made it into his hand. We were both totally confused. I looked under the computer desk in weird cracks but never found it. I still think about it. A similar thing happened to my dad once. He was driving through the front gates at work, military, and showed his badge. Before the guard could see it, the wind blew it out of his hand. They searched and couldn't find it, so he had to park outside and get a co-worker to come and escort him in. Years later he had the door panel off his car for something unrelated, and there in the bottom channel was his card. It has somehow dropped through the window scrapers. One of my co-workers dropped a $20 bill while working the register. Looked for that bill for half an hour and kept an eye out for weeks. No luck. 4 years later, during a renovation, they took the giant cigarette island out, and under the plywood base was a $20 bill. When I was little, me and my babysitter were outside and it started to rain. My babysitter said, "Watch this," and walked out into the road. No cars. She lifted her arms to form a T shape, and it started to rain heavier. She put them down and the rain slowed down. She put them back up and it poured again. I'm sure there's a valid explanation, but for now I'm still baffled. It's obvious. She's a witch. Burn her. Car followed me home from work late at night. Didn't know where the police station was, so I stopped on a dark road near my suburb to make sure he was actually following me, and sure enough he stops behind me. I got out and grabbed the emergency axe out of the truck without even shutting off the car and started walking towards it, and the car sped off. I was tired and stupid for doing that, but I will never know why or who that was. Ah yes, the old horror flick move. Stop at the darkest road you can find when you're being followed. It's only a bad idea when you're not the monster. I was traveling in Italy when two American girls came up to me and started talking excitedly about how they couldn't believe they'd run into me in Rome and wanted to know how my trip had been going. But I had no idea who either of them were. And if you're thinking it's a prank, bro, they knew specific things about my life and my travels that only someone who knew me would have known. I still have no idea who the hell they were. This happened to me in Switzerland, except it was one random girl working in a shop. Turns out my grandparents had run into her when she'd visited Australia and told them all about their wonderful grandkid, with pictures of course. I got grandkidded halfway around the world. When I was a kid, like 7 or 8, I started to randomly see nothing but brown, like staring at a wall, usually only on one eye, but not always the same, rarely on both at the same time. Went to several doctors and they did some testing, but nothing came up. As I grew older, there was more time between occurrences, and now I haven't had it in close to 10 years. Sometimes it still bothers me not knowing WTF that was. Ocular migraine? I sometimes get them. Not always associated with pain. Either one or both eyes will get visual snow until everything fades to grey. Passes in minutes, usually. My thought too, my younger son kept occasionally mentioning flashing lights and how annoying they were. Worried about detached retinas or something serious, we took him to the optometrist. They found nothing wrong but referred him to an ophthalmologist who also couldn't find any physical problem. Had mentioned it to a friend who is an optometrist and he suggested it could be a migraine and that they aren't always associated with headaches. He still will occasionally give a big harumph and complain about how annoying they are. My mother died about a dozen years ago. At the funeral home we received a lovely bouquet of flowers with a card from the band the Red Hot Chili Peppers that said, "We are saddened to hear of Renata's passing. We are a humble family from southern Indiana. There is zero chance she ever had any contact with those boys. Is this something they just randomly do? They would have loved her, though. She was the warmest person you could ever hope to know." Tweet them and ask. Renata Blol was as a recording engineer. Maybe they thought your mother was her? That's probably it. Makes a lot of sense. When I was like 7, I was playing my Game Boy at my grandma's house and I got pissed that I kept dying in Mario, so I took the actual game out and threw it at the wall. I saw the game hit the wall and fall behind the dresser. After moving everything in the room and many years of searching, I still look for it and still wonder what happened to it occasionally. It slipped between the seams of the wall and floor. Your rage quitting was so powerful it rewrote reality. A few years ago I got a citation, and when I went to pay it off, $350, they told me it was already paid for. Asked everyone I know. No one claimed they did. I don't think I'll ever find out who it was. It might have been a glitch in fire system. That happens more often than places would like to admit. I wondered if that was it. I guess it will always be a mystery, lol. Similar to a lot of other stories here. Dropped a screwdriver in my bedroom. Heard it hit the floor. Then it just disappeared. I never saw it again. I wasn't even standing. I was kneeling. So it only fell a few inches. It wasn't a huge screwdriver. But there aren't any gaps in my bedroom anywhere that I could find that a screwdriver half the size would fit into. I like to imagine that whenever this happens it is actually the very tiny possibility that the screwdriver has just teleported elsewhere thanks to quantum duckery. The screwdriver has now entered the dimension of the mind and become part of the cosmic consciousness. This shit happened to me at work. I was assembling a meat grinder. The wrench slipped, hit the floor, couldn't find it, looked for 45 minutes. We found it 6 months later. It had somehow bounced up inside of the paneling that housed the machine. An opening so small I didn't even check because I assumed it was ridiculous and physically impossible to fit, but it did. Two particular stories. In 2015 I was working on some assignments at home at like 9 AM. I was sitting at the desk in the living room, doing my work on the computer. I could see directly into my housemate's room from the desk, but since he was asleep the door was shut. The door was slightly raised off the ground so you could see if there's anyone standing behind it, or their feet anyway. Suddenly the door starts shaking and rattling as if someone is trying to demolish it. There's no one behind it. I'm just looking at it with my mouth agape, and then, a few terrifying minutes later, my roommate opens the door and asks me, "Dude, WTF are you doing?" So I go, "It wasn't me. I'm sat over here," and we both are flummoxed to this day. WTF caused that? I was dozing off a few days back when I heard a door shut and someone loudly running away. I live alone. I checked all the doors and they were all shut. I don't get it. There is a perfectly rational explanation for this event. A demon. A demon. Exploding head syndrome could explain the second story. It's basically you dozing off and then being violently awoken by hearing a loud explosion. Bang, scream, alarm, etc. The whole thing is your brain pulling a mean prank on you. Because you are, for example, stressed or sleep deprived. I've heard a distorted scream the 3-4 times it has happened to me, and it has been equally scary each time. The time I woke up on top of my refrigerator, I don't remember exactly how old I was. Sometime in my early teens. But it's exactly what I said. I woke up on top of my refrigerator. I had been sleeping up there curled up like a cat. And to this day I have no idea how I got up there. There was nobody home at the time who could have put me up there while I was sleeping. And there's no way I could have climbed up there unassisted, but there were no chairs or stools or anything around the fridge I could have used to climb up. And I obviously couldn't have used one and put it back while I was still up there. I also had no prior history of sleepwalking whatsoever. And to my knowledge I've never sleepwalked again since to this day. I have absolutely no ducking idea what happened. And it still bugs me. If anybody has any theories as to how this could have been possible, I would love to hear them. Theory: you go hastily woke up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. You're thirsty. This happens. Sleepily goes to the kitchen and all of a sudden saw a huge ass cockroach on the floor besides the fridge. Climbed the fridge like a monkey. Hit your head with the ceiling and got knocked out on top of the fridge. Snooze fest until you wake up in the morning. Another one. Someone once came to my parents' door at 3 AM. claiming they ran away from home because they were being abused by their father and we were the only people to answer. My parents checked that person into a shelter and funded them for weeks. Eventually they left the shelter and returned home. Then came out and said that my parents made the whole thing up and that their family is perfect. Then sent a huge mailer out to hundreds of people saying my dad is a rapist. He's a local figure, so it was a big deal. To this day I have no idea if that family is psychotic or somehow manipulated their child. It blows my mind. Maybe the parents forced him to make these accusations. Definitely the time a friend and I saw a dragonfly that had a wingspan of over a foot in the American Midwest. It was too big to be real, yet it was. We were maybe 12 and this was over 20 years ago. He still remembers as vividly as I do. Well, there is a species that is about 2/3 of that. Combine that with you thinking stuff was bigger because you used to be a bit smaller, and you seeing one of the biggest one of these would make sense. On the 4th of July I had a few drinks, then a few more. The next morning I had a black eye, a bunch of $1 bills, $137 worth, and a long-time crush in bed with me. Neither of us remembers the night before after midnight. None of our friends saw us after midnight, and we both had no text or calls outgoing after midnight. It was still one of my best 4ths ever, just with big gaps. Sherlock Holmes on the case. The stack of dollar bills clearly indicates you deliberately obtained them as change. Why? To go to a strip club, of course. The cheapest way to be titillated. Before you had the chance to spend too much at the club, you heard a commotion in a side room. A dancer burst out, pursued by an unruly customer. Being the white knight you are, you intercepted him and took a fist to the face before security dragged him out. The dancer was your crush. You had no idea of her secret stripper job. She was so grateful for your chivalry that she took you home before you could spend any more of your dollars. Aliens wiped both your memories. Or drugs, alcohol. One night I heard my boyfriend come home from work while I was sleeping. He came in and said hi, then went out to the living room. I get up not long after to convince him to come to bed, and he's not home. I called him and he told me he had stayed late at work and repeatedly told me he had not come home that night at all. I freaked out and made him come home right away. Creeped me out for a while. Happened to me. Husband went out with some friends. I went to lay down upstairs. Took all 4 dogs with me. Closed the bedroom door. About an hour later I'm still scrolling online and hear the front door open. The dogs start going crazy. I hear keys hit the table. Heavy footsteps walking up the stairs. The dogs are getting excited, whining, tails wagging, pawing at the door. The footsteps come down the hallway and toward our bedroom door, then stop. I wait a few minutes and he still hasn't come in the bedroom. All 4 dogs sitting, staring at the door, tails wagging. I call out, "Hey, what are you doing?" The door's unlocked. Sometimes I lock the bedroom door at night. No reply. I yell again, "Hey, door's open." Nothing. I open the bedroom door and the dogs take off through the house, running up and down the stairs. So I go back to the bed to grab my phone and call. I'm thinking maybe he left something in the car and stepped back out to get it. I call his cell. He picks up and I immediately hear the background noise of a bar, music talking. My heart sank. I knew there was no way in 2 minutes he made it from home to the bar. I call the dogs, run back in the room and tell him what happened. He rushes home, checks the house and nothing. I don't know who came to visit me that night. I was wide awake, and the dogs reacting at the exact times I heard the door open. Key's footsteps only confirms to me that I didn't imagine it. If nothing was taken and you live in an apartment complex or some kind of mass-built home situation, maybe some of the locks are, for some godforsakes reason, keyed the same way, and someone mistakenly entered your pad, heard the dogs and left without wanting to be noticed because that'd be awkward. When I was 12 I was working under the table jobs and made a lot of money. I hid it in a helmet in my room. I remember taking $20 once, but since then I've moved twice and to this day don't know where the money is. I had 3 total hiding spots and can't remember if I spent it or someone stole it. It was probably $500. I took it. Was your second hiding spot under your clothes? One day I woke up and my Rolex watch was gone from my bedside table. I was gutted, to say the least. It had enormous sentimental value. I searched the house high and low. Nothing. About 10 months later I went to put some redundant boxes on a shelf that required a ladder and a steady person to foot it. Bear in mind this was a Victorian house with high shelves and these we had never used or could see on. My Rolex was there, and it was still running and on time. Still freaks me out and still freaks out my partner. Do you have a cat by chance? My cat has tried to hide my shoe before. I moved into a new house in July. After unloading all the things I am the owner of, I realized that I had neglected some basics like toilet paper and dish detergent. I went out and stocked up on a few things. including a giant pack of my favorite EP, with the bears on it, only to realize that my mom had picked some up for me while I was out. This giant pack of TP became a thorn in my side as I moved into a house that was a complete gut job, and every way I turned I was tripping up over boxes and such. There wasn't a shelf or cupboard big enough to store it, so I was always throwing it somewhere. Cue the day I need it. Where is this monstrosity? Nowhere. I search every nook and cranny of my house, which has become a lot more organized over the past couple of weeks. I search. I ask friends and family. It's gone. I go shopping and try to forget about it. I still look for that giant pack of toilet paper. I can't forget. It haunts me. How does a humongous pack of toilet paper disappear? And this, I feel, will be the greatest mystery of my life. My calculus teacher just kind of materializes out of nowhere. I know what direction he walks toward the classroom, so I've stood out there and looked. But he doesn't come from anywhere. He is just walking towards class all of a sudden with a cup of coffee. It's like he lives in his own pocket dimension or something. That's only possible for an advanced calculus teacher. One day, when I was in 8th grade, I remember being woken up from my bathroom floor by my stepmother. It was around 7 p.m. and I had no recollection of that day, Wednesday, or the day before. But I remember that Monday clearly. I still wonder what happened during those 2 days that I don't recall and how I ended up passed out on the bathroom floor. Concussion maybe? As someone who woke up in a hospital in a country that I have no memories of traveling to, I can say concussion sounds likely. I was actually snowboarding and it was the first day of our trip, but the concussion was so bad that I lost an entire week of memories. I was opening mail at work, boxes of various kind. We were in a dire need of a pin extractor tool, and one of the boxes was from that store. I open it, check the list that it should indeed be the tool, but the box only had a piece of brown packaging paper. I even showed the empty box to a colleague next to me. I then proceed to the next box, which was from a supplier abroad. The tool was inside that box, as well as the supplier's item. The box was sealed with supplier's tape, so there's no way someone just moved it there in some mail center or something. We're still completely baffled. What in the duck happened back then? Around 2004 I was working as a projectionist at a movie theater. One of the kids' movies ended, but the last movie to end still had about 50 minutes left to its runtime. So one of the things I would typically do would be to check the theater for left behind loose change or unopened candy. So I run down there and look around for maybe 10 minutes. I make my way back upstairs thinking I still have about 40 minutes left in my night. And next thing you know, my boss is calling me on the walkie-talkie asking me if I'm done and ready to go home. I thought he was just messing around, which he sometimes would do, and didn't think much of it. Until I realized none of the movies were running, and holy crap, I somehow just time traveled about 45 minutes into the future. My watch was even wrong. I've never been able to explain it to myself, and at this point I'm just assuming my mind made the whole thing up. Or I'm a one-time time traveler that one night randomly moved ahead about 45 minutes for no reason. Is it possible that your watch was just wrong? If you were going by your watch the whole time, it could have easily been off. If you verified the last movie was still running before you went, instead of just going by what time it currently was. Maybe you caught the last minute or so and your watch fooled you into thinking it had more runtime left than it really did. My cousin and I were having a girls' night at home and went to go grab some wine. So, I lived in a basement suite that had French doors, which I always locked when I left. When we came back, my cat's 2 food dishes were sitting on the placemat I was using right in front of the door. No kibble or water spilled. I usually kept them in the kitchen. It was like someone had displayed them for when we came back. Saw it through the French doors and we both froze. Freaked me the hell out for a long time. It was the end of school and was walking home. Took me about 10 minutes. However, when I arrived home and opened the door, to my left was about 100 dead bees on the floor. All of my windows were closed. There was no holes or anything in the walls, ceilings. We even had a guy come in to check for a nest, but there was nothing, just a pile of mysterious dead bees. It still confuses me today on how they got there and why they were dead. I used to work pest control and I can tell you, This happens quite a bit. Usually what happens is that they enter the home through a vent and begin to swarm to look for a place to build a nest. If you found them by a window, it's because they tried to escape out that window and died from hitting said window repeatedly. Bees aren't the smartest motherfuckers. I've got 3 children with pretty unique names. Not unheard of but not common. My oldest son, Rylan, was 9 at the time and sitting on the couch, my cell phone rang. Which was weird because it was only used for emergencies as I used my house phone more often being a stay-at-home mom. I answered it even though I didn't recognize the number. Here is how the convo goes. Me. Hello? Teen boy. Hey mom. Who is this? Looking in the living room to see all 3 of my kids hanging out on the couch. TB. Mom. It's me. Rylan. Me. Rylan who? Now I'm frantically looking at my son who is very confused. TB. Mom. Stop playing. Phone sounds like it's got a hand covering the mouthpiece and I can hear another voice say no it's not time yet. Oh I'm sorry. Wrong number. Click. Whether it was a prank or my kid from the future I'll never know. I do know I had to hold on to the wall so I didn't pass out. After I tried to call back about 2 minutes later it said the number was disconnected. Super freaky. Before my mum committed suicide, she sent letters to the family and her friends. I know there was one for me but I never received it. I wonder what she wrote and I will never know. I once went to a movie by myself when I was living in Georgia for a few months. I was seeing a movie that was several weeks old so the place was almost completely empty except for a few people in the way front. I sat in the middle seat in the middle row. A few minutes before the movie starts this group of friends walks in and decides to sit in my row. And they split so that half are on each side of me. They put me in the middle of their group and proceeded to talk over me like I wasn't there until the movie started. I didn't say anything because I was so confused and it's not like I can ask them not to use the open seats around me. But if they had picked any other row they could have sat together. Why my row? Why split the group around me? Was it just a really dumb prank? Hey let's just sit around this guy. It'll be hilarious. I must know. Kamusharon. I probs should not be telling this story but duck it. I run my own business. I used to rent a building but we had to move as it was having some issues with the roof. We had to end up suing the landlord for money she owed us. Well after we moved out and were suing her we found out she was living in the building, as it could not be rented with the roof issues, but had not paid for water or electricity. So she was using the homeless services for that stuff. Well after a week when she sold the building, someone had graffitied her name and then the words Camus in large letters on all the doors. I to this day have no idea what it means but can be heard muttering Camusharon around the house but it drives the wife crazy so I have to stop. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content bruh. It's free and that's a great price.